Welcome, everyone, to the 16th edition of Dasra Philanthropy Week. For a decade and a half, DPW has been shaping conversations, sparking collaborations, and driving real impact across India's development sector. And today, we kick off another incredible week, one that challenges us to think bigger, act bolder, and reimagine India's future together. As we move closer to India's centenary of independence, TPW 2025 is a platform for us to collectively envision a future rooted in equity, resilience, and opportunity for all. This year, under the theme Rising at 2047, we're bringing together visionary leaders, philanthropists, and change makers to explore bold, collaborative solutions to the systemic challenges and drive inclusive growth. At this year, DPW is bigger than ever. We're hosting 40 plus convenings, both virtual and in person, with 120 plus thought leaders, 1,000 plus stakeholders, and 20 partners, while also expanding to Bangalore for the first time. With the lens of India for the world for India, our discussions will dive deep into equity, collaboration, inclusion, innovation, measurement, and sustainability. Before we dive in, here are a few housekeeping reminders to ensure a seamless experience. To maintain clear audio and speaker focus, participant mics and videos have been disabled. Please respect speaker privacy and refrain from sending personal messages. Use the chat feature to ask questions and engage in discussions. If you face technical issues, send us a private message to the host for assistance. Hindi translation is available throughout the session. Simply press the globe icon to access it. Let's get started, and thank you for joining us. And welcome to our session today titled Unboxing Sustainability. I'm Roop Shah, a research and evaluation professional at Dasra and one of the authors of this report developed in collaboration with Dentsu. Together, Dentsu and Dasra have explored what sustainability looks like in the digital era. And over the past few months, we've delved deep into research and engaged with key stakeholders to map how nonprofits, philanthropists, and the government are tackling sustainability challenges across critical sectors. We're excited to share our findings with you. And this session has two parts to it. First, we'll walk you through the key insights of our research, followed by a panel discussion with experts shaping this space. Moving on to quickly set context in which this report has been narrativized. As you're all aware that we now live in a world which is undergoing a massive digital transformation where everything is just a click away. Shopping, travel, and daily life are faster and easier than ever. And these benefits have changed the way we live our lives with under 10-minute deliveries of groceries, at-home salon services, and doorstep pickups at our convenience. But this ease comes at a cost, driving overconsumption and impacting the environment and society in ways that often go unnoticed. The digital economy is often celebrated for its role in driving growth and employment, but behind every click are hidden costs. We have pollution, depleting resources, and health risks. Gig workers like delivery riders, service providers, and drivers, they face harsh conditions daily and yet remain overlooked in sustainability conversations. Another key facet that emerges is the story of inequality. While digital access has grown rapidly, only a small group of about 250 million people in India, which is 17% of the population, drives most of the high end consumption. But the environmental impact of this consumption affects 100% of the population. So these statistics and evolving realities compelled us to rethink our position, leading us to frame this report that explores sustainability in a rapidly changing digital world through its impact on both the planet and its people, because we recognize that this is not just a story of digital evolution, but one of responsibility, well being, and the future we choose to build. We did this analysis by identifying four key sectors and each illustrating the intersection of digital consumption and the sustainability challenges. We focused on fuel, where we explored how urban mobility is changing with the rise of ride hailing applications and e commerce boom, both driving fuel consumption and therefore the well being implications on the gig workers who are the backbone of these products of digitalization. Secondly, we looked at energy to examine electricity use, the push for cleaner energy, and the quality of access to energy across India. Third, we looked at materials and specifically at electronic waste management and how India's informal sector plays a critical role in recycling and closing this waste loop. And lastly, we looked at natural resources, specifically looking at water consumption, particularly how data centers and fast fashion industry, both products of digitalization, are straining already scarce water resources. To strengthen our research, we also spoke with experts and practitioners from civil society, academia, social enterprises, and the private sector across these four sectors to enrich our findings. While our report delves into the sustainability challenges, their impact on livelihoods, and the solution building, in this presentation today, we'll spotlight the collective actions that stakeholders can take to drive sustainable consumption in the digital era. Let's dive in. Over to you, Sanat.
Thank you, Rupsha. Hi, everyone. I'm Sanat, one of the four co-authors of this report. Um, in our report, we've discussed cues for collective action for key stakeholders. And I'm going to begin talking about the government. The government as a actor has a vantage point where through policies, it can create an enabling environment to drive sustainable consumption in many spheres of the economy. There are already solutions that are being implemented in various local and global jurisdictions at various scales. The government at the federal level can leverage some of these good practices and adapt them to the Indian context. For example, it can encourage local governments to implement better parking policies following global practices that makes the cost of using personal vehicles more expensive, thereby discouraging their use and thus reducing the associated emissions and congestion that come with personal vehicles. Taking another example of increasing awareness amongst consumers for the uptake of rooftop solar systems, state governments in India can really learn from each other. Taking a local example of the government of Gujarat that has been quite successful in its communication campaigns to encourage the uptake of rooftop solar systems under different schemes. The government of Gujarat has disseminated its messages through various forms such as SMSs, phone calls, hoardings, and even door-to-door campaigns, and developed an AI-based WhatsApp chatbot. Another key um, another key stakeholder that plays a unique role as a catalyst in driving sustainable consumption is the civil society. The civil society directly works with communities at the grassroots level, and so it's uniquely positioned to fast track some of these changes. It can act as a knowledge partner to increase awareness, collaboration, and accountability for sustainable consumption. For example, most consumers don't know where their products, what materials they're made of, where they come from, and what environmental impact that they have based on their everyday use and its recyclability as well. Understanding this can help drive better sustainable consumption behavior. And that's where civil society can come in and take the lead by spearheading some of these awareness building initiatives with the communities that they work with. For example, civil society can work to embed awareness programs for the uptake of, say, for example, renewable energy and its benefits in schools and colleges to drive long-term behavioral change. By making these conversations a part of everyday learning, especially maybe in formative years in schools, civil society can really drive a generational shift in mindset. I'll pass it back to my colleague Rupsha to take you through the rest of our points.
Thank you, Sanat. Looking at our third key stakeholder, the private sector and the social enterprises. So both private sector and the social enterprises are uniquely positioned to lead the sustainability transition by leveraging its innovation, market influence, and operational scale. By embracing technology-driven solutions, responsible business practices, and strategic collaborations, these stakeholders can create these systemic shifts by making sustainable choices more accessible and mainstream. So if we look at urban mobility as an example, our key expert interviews highlighted a major issue that we're all facing right now. Think about how we travel in a city. Public transport like buses and metros can be affordable and eco friendly, but getting to and from them isn't always easy, right? For example, if your home is far from a metro station, or if there's no easy way to reach your final destination after getting off a bus, the journey becomes extremely frustrating. And this is called the first and the last mile problem, where there is no simple way to start or finish a trip using public transport. And because of this, many people choose cars or bikes instead, making traffic, congestion, and pollution much worse. In cities like Beijing and Taipei, however, traveling is much easier because everything is connected. People can check real time bus and metro arrivals on their phones, use a single ticket for different types of transport, and switch between buses, trains, and bikes without any hassle. We can also be inspired by these models and explore how the private sector in India can use technology to make public transport smoother. And with a smart, all in one application, people can plan and pay for their entire journey in one place, making buses, metros, and shared rides as easy as just booking a cab. Such innovations could significantly reduce dependence on private vehicles and make sustainable transport more seamless and therefore a preferred choice. Looking at our fourth stakeholder, the philanthropy ecosystem, philanthropy has a unique ability again for bridging critical funding gaps and providing patient and flexible capital. Patient capital, unlike traditional investments, prioritizes long term impact over immediate returns. And this enables long term sustained research, capacity building, and inclusive partnerships, ensuring that sustainability solutions are not just scalable, but are also equitable and enduring. Again, when we look at the example of how, let's say, philanthropy can drive sustainability and energy access, we have an example of Smart Power India, which is an initiative by the Rockefeller Foundation. And it has successfully deployed solar powered mini grids to electrify remote communities. And by supporting similar projects like this, philanthropy can help provide steady power to homes, businesses, hospitals, and schools. And since many rural areas struggle with finances and infrastructure, philanthropic funding can make these projects less risky for investors and help community based energy enterprises to grow. Another key takeaway and another example from the urban mobility landscape is that sustainable urban mobility also requires a fundamental cultural and behavioral shift. Public transport needs to be seen as desirable and not just as a second rate alternative. However, this behavioral change must go hand in hand with infrastructure improvements to ensure that public transport is practical, safe, and efficient. And this is where, again, philanthropy can play a vital role. By funding large scale public awareness campaigns, foundations can really highlight the environmental, social, and economic benefits of mass public commuting. We have global examples like European Mobility Week, New York's Car Free Day, and even in India, we have initiatives like grassroots campaigns of Pedestrian Day, Cycle Day, where people are encouraged to take up walking and cycling as mainstream mobility options for a day or for a week. And this is an area of opportunity where philanthropic investments in such initiatives can really accelerate cultural shifts and make these initiatives more frequent and streamlined and support driving in systemic change in urban mobility. With that, we conclude our presentation on the report, and we are thrilled to be launching it and making it publicly available by February 27th. So stay tuned on our social media channels and website for more details. Thank you for your engagement. And now we move on to the second part for the panel discussion, and I hand it over to my colleague Kasturi to take it forward.
Thank you, team, and hi, everybody. I'm Kasturi. I'm a qualitative researcher at Dasra. Before we begin with the panel discussion, a huge congratulations to the research team behind this topic. Khushbu, Rupsha, Sanat, and Aditya, thank you for putting together this rigorous and insightful report on an extremely complex topic. For our audience, we are launching this report on the DPW plenary day, which is February 27th, on all our platforms. And we hope you will read it and read it many times as you unpack this topic. Okay, on to our panel discussion. So it can often be very, very daunting to introspect on our carbon footprints, right? And it feels very awful to be shown how extractive our lives have become. So we have a few options. Either we look the other way and say this is the cost we need to bear, or we shrink into an analysis paralysis. Better yet, we speak with those who are on the front lines of these issues and solutions and draw inspiration from them to understand what we can do better. So for today's discussion, we've done exactly that, and I'm so proud to introduce our panelists. Narayan Devanathan, the President and Chief Strategy Officer at Dentsu South Asia. Narayan started off as a copywriter and today heads strategy for several purposeful marketing campaigns and collaborations at Dentsu. Narayan is also the reason this report exists, having nudged us to build foundational action research on nonprofit and philanthropy work in the realm of overconsumption in the digital era. Narayan, thank you so much for being a knowledge partner and catalyst in this journey. Dr. Anumita Roy Chaudhary, Executive Director at the New Delhi-based think tank Center for Science and Environment. Anumita is a leading voice and practitioner in India's Right to Clean Air campaign and sustainable urban mobility, having influenced improvements in emission standards for vehicles, public transport, and industry. She is also leading CSE's global program on clean air in Africa. Huda Jafar, director at Selco Foundation, is someone who is anchoring change in India's rural districts through decentralized renewable energy interventions in areas of healthcare and livelihoods. Huda leads this by deploying an energy lens to mitigate the twin fallouts of poverty and climate change for India's most vulnerable communities. And we have Abhijit Mukherjee, Program Manager for Sustainability at Zomato, who's deeply involved in improving gig worker equity through Zomato's comprehensive delivery partner equity framework and similar programs. His background in DEI enables him to bring principles of equity to this company that is kind of the epitome of India's digital revolution. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Want to start by hearing from you, Narayan. India's come a long way in terms of growth and development with a truly impressive digital penetration track record. We've arguably never before had such a direct interface between brands and society. And this connection is driving many, many value chains today. Being an organization who's helped some of the biggest brands sell themselves better, why did Dentsu venture into this realm of overconsumption and why now?
Kasturi, thank you so much first for not sparing me and just calling out the tough question upfront. But even before that, you were very generous, maybe overly generous with the kind words that you had for Dentsu and for me. We're all partners in this, so thank you for this opportunity to collaborate over here. Why now is a great question, because if not now, it'll be too late as we go forward. But why do we want to tackle overconsumption, especially as, and I'm going to face some internal flack for this probably, but I'm going to call myself out over here. You know, as one of the world's leading marketing and brand communications organizations, my day job is actually to persuade people to buy more brands and prefer some brands over other. And I would probably be called an active accomplice in the act of overconsumption in my day job. But at the same time, I'm very conscious and probably, I won't overstate it to say I'm proud to be part of an organization such as Dentsu, which now has committed publicly, including to the stock market, to say that we operate by the philosophy called Sanpo Yoshi. It's a simple Japanese phrase that says that everything that we do must now benefit three stakeholders equally: customers, business, and society. Because the principle of first do no harm is no longer sufficient. As people who wield the ability to shape not just culture but shape people's behaviors, we've so far focused on what I call downstream sustainability, which is, as you've been referring to, also sustainable consumption. But I want us to focus a little more on upstream, on sustainable production and sustainable behaviors, even before we ask consumers to behave responsibly and sustainably. And so while we can create channels of access that enable sustainable consumption, I'd probably focus our energy on a couple of other A's in the spirit of alliteration, which are accountability and advocacy. I want all of us in industry to hold ourselves a lot more accountable in how we produce sustainably and how we then exhort people to consume sustainably. And even before all of that, maybe preemptively think about advocacy both within the organization and externally as well, within the ecosystem and externally as well. And I'll just take a minute more to draw upon actually what is an ancient Indian philosophical system, which has always been used in either the spiritual or philosophical or religious context, but I'm bringing it here in this context of business and sustainability. And it's the concept of Advaita. I think some of us may be familiar with it. It means non-duality. And we typically look at even the points that you've covered in the report, look at, for example, sustainability and consumption as paradoxes, as opposites, right? That may not be able to coexist together. But rather than looking at them as paradoxes, I want to argue that they're probably non-dual in nature. And that's because if you again go back to the very literal meaning of the word Advaita, it actually means non-secondness, meaning you don't put either of the two concepts in a secondary position. So if you say sustainability follows consumption or consumption follows sustainability, then you're conferring one a secondary position. Rather, if you look at it from the perspective of saying you have to look both of them in the eye at the same time, then you solve for them together, not one as a consequence of the other. And so I think recognizing this as a problem, acknowledging we are all accomplices in creating the problem, but equally taking responsibility for solving for this, I think probably will be the first step, and no better time than now to acknowledge and do this together.
Thank you, Narayan. Anumita, I'd like to bring you into the conversation at this point. A highly contested topic at this crossroads of aspiration, development, and sustainability is transport. For many Indians, issues of access and mobility have been critical to their lives and livelihoods. And for many, highways, bridges, and sea links have become pathways to prosperity. However, with increasing vehicles on these roads, triggered by the advent of ride-hailing apps and a growth in purchasing power amongst the middle class in India, there is an unprecedented increase in vehicular air pollution, and it's claiming thousands of lives annually. You have always said that India needs to and can reimagine urban mobility. Would you please share a few examples of alternatives that have the potential to make mobility in India more sustainable and less destructive?
Thanks so much, Kasturi. And it was really great to listen to the summary of the report that you have released. And congratulations to the team. So Ruksha, Sanat, Khushbu, and you yourself. So in fact, that's a great learning. And you have captured a lot of the critical points, exactly what you are referring to in that context. So what struck me when I was listening to you and the presentation, that one thing to say about the mobility and transport overall and what is unsustainable about it. But that critical linkage, and I think I'll focus a bit more on that, the linkage that you make, that the new age that we are looking at, and especially what digitization is going to do to our lives and in the future, that is a very interesting new area of thought that is coming in. And so I thought that what it's really challenging us to do is to think differently, and especially the potential of digitization that we understand can transform the conventional ways of doing things. And we certainly understand that this is also going to have a profound impact on our consumption patterns. But whether this is going to help us or not, and to what extent, and how can we really leverage digitization moving forward? That's the question that we are asking today. That in the context of transport and mobility, will digitization nudge us towards sustainable consumption, Or will it become uncontrollable Frankenstein, okay, which will keep pushing us toward overconsumption? But answer lies in the choices that you and I are going to make today. Okay, what is the change, that the terms of change that we are going to script today? And the story, as you very rightly said, is already unfolding in our cities, in our polluted and congested cities, especially the way we travel. So we are asking that what is going on? Will this keep us locked in the car-based personal mobility paradigm forever, right? And with very high pollution and energy impacts, or do we see an option, a possibility of moving towards more sustainable commuting? But what that I really need to demystify, because often what overconsumption of personal cars mean is not clear, not really well understood in the policy realm. So clearly cars occupy more road space, more public land for parking, and carry much less people than public transport, consume more energy, emit more pollution per person. But at the same time, you may ask, but our cars are certainly getting a lot cleaner today, right? But keep in mind that even though the new cars are 3 to 4 times more fuel efficient, less polluting than previous genre, this incremental gain gets easily swamped by the doubling of the fleet every 5 to 6 years. Also, another dimension, cars make us sedentary, and which is increasing our health costs. And studies now showing that how inactive lifestyle due to car dependency is leading to obesity, metabolic diseases, compromising population health, increasing healthcare spending. In fact, what we need today is the city has to turn into a gym with more walking and cycling. And also, more cars also mean more congestion with high economic cost. And if you have looked at the new studies that have come out, like the Boston Consulting Group, etc., and they're saying that due to productivity loss, due to high consumption of fuel, air pollution, the cost of car congestion in cities like Mumbai, Delhi, Bangalore, Kolkata, it's like over 1.4 lakh crore annually. That's totally unsustainable, right? And which means that therefore, if we keep demanding more cars, then we are also demanding more land for roads, for parking, and that is going to take away the space from the uninvestments, from the affordable housing, from common urban services, from infrastructure for pedestrians and public transport. And another very interesting thing that people need to understand, that with cars, the community space is also shrinking because it is losing, or rather it's reducing, the social interaction and community engagement as you remain locked inside the car, and it is affecting the mental well-being. So if we have understood that context, then what can we really do? And so we really need to see transformation in our city, the mobility transformation, okay, which is more people-oriented and not car-oriented. And in that context, if I again bring back the issue of digitization, the digitization can be a foe, okay, if it only ends up inducing more and more demand for additional travel, and we fail to fix the transport systems to prevent shifts from public transport, walking and cycling to automotive travel. But the same digitization can be a friend. Our planning and policy can be a friend if that new technology development innovation works otherwise. And that's happening already. So we are beginning to see the change where the governments, private investors, they are leveraging the big data, artificial intelligence, automatization of digital platforms to provide seamless integration of all mobility services. We are looking at fair integration of bus and metro for seamless and affordable journey. They are doing travel demand forecasting to plan public transport services, ride sharing. So this is enabling human engagement and shared decision making around mobility choices. So finally, what I would say, that let us try, one, of course, we need very big policy push, okay, to really bring in the transformation, and also use the same digitization to nudge behavior. the public behavior. It can nudge people by providing real-time public transport information, highlighting environmental benefits of using public transport. It can even, we can even set default options towards public transport on navigation apps. These are the kind of things that are being talked about. And a lot more, peer comparison, social pressure that you can create through by really changing the values around how we travel. So there are technical solutions, there are urban design and urban planning solutions. But what will be a game changer is only when we begin to associate a real value and privilege with the sustainable transit that we are looking towards and want that see change to happen in our cities. So I'll kind of end with that.
Thank you, Anamita. I'm now switching gears from urban to rural. And as I do, I want to draw a quick sketch of energy equity. Many of us on this session and in our circles have integrated AI into our daily lives, right? ChatGPT and other platforms have become our writing, thinking, and planning assistants. But what we don't ever have to engage with is the quantum of natural resources going into these activities every second of every day. Not very far from our cities, there are peri-urban and rural areas where energy poverty is a very real barrier for even the most basic human development outcomes. Huda, Selco Foundation has contended with this extremely constructively with sustainable technology and clean energy interventions in districts across India. Your take on energy consumption is not large data centers or cloud technology, but built environments like solar-powered Kinara stores and hospitals. Would you please tell us more about how rural communities are engaging with natural resources and energy through your programs? And what can we learn about intent and accountability through this?
Thanks. Thank you so much, Kasturi, for having me. And thanks so much to Dasra for hosting this. Happy to be here. It's really good to listen to the other panelists as well. So as you rightly said, we never really get called into consumption discussions or mitigation discussions for that matter, because in general, the idea is that, what is the consumption or the mitigation play here? Because if you're working on leaving no one behind, or if you're working on any kind of development agenda, technically you're adding consumption, right? So how is that a reduction play, right? But that being said, I think what we essentially do is work at this nexus of climate adaptation and climate mitigation, which basically means that, when you talk about adaptation program, they generally, you can't possibly say that you can't possibly put the burden of consumption and carbon on people that don't have enough, on many of the communities which are in remote and rural and tribal contexts, right? But I think the opportunity here is huge. So we ourselves work through a systems change lens, and we look at both, areas of livelihoods and healthcare. So to just give you an example, like you said, we work on solar powered, technologies, etc. Right? But if you look at it from a lens of energy alone, like let's say, water pumping is happening right now, and the farms need to move to clean energy because of, emissions or whatever, electrification, etc. And if you move them to solar water pump, what inevitably happens is there is an overuse of water, there is a depletion of water resources, and inevitably there will be migration or there will be abject poverty that's happened. So I think what we've learned, I think the hard way as a sector, is that when you place the problem statement at the center and kind of work towards optimizing that, you have much better results. So say, for example, the problem here is not the solar pumps or the diesel or the, electrification of solar pumps. It's actually the use of water. That you need to actually design for better cropping patterns, better usage of water, whether it's protective irrigation, drip irrigation, sprinklers. You need to design for, how are you actually, what is your source of water, right? How are you conserving that? And along with that, design for solar water pumps. So I think what we've learned is, yes, you do need people to look at it from a policy angle, from a technology angle, but where we see the gaps, because each of these problems are not that simple, right? I mean, as also ma'am was mentioning that it's not about the car, it's about going from one place to the other, right? So how do you zoom out and get that systems perspective to make sure that you're actually solving for the problem in a most optimized manner? and not creating more problems, right? Because if I'm only solving for consumption, if I'm only solving for efficiency, I might actually create more problems because of overconsumption alone, right? So we're constantly faced with those challenges. But really, the opportunity that we see here and what we've been able to sort of at least try and prove in some small way with the number of failures also that we've had is around, very often you see when any rural household or any kind of end user that is not typically in the tier 1 tier 2 kind of segments, when they go on a clean energy ladder, they tend to stick to that ladder, and there's a growth on that ladder. So, if a household starts with clean energy, there's a generation that goes through clean energy dependence. That generation always says, okay, my next, chili grinder will come from, I will power it with solar. My next refrigerator will be powered with solar. So generally there is an uptake, there is a ladder that they get on, right? I mean, just to give you a little more context, if you look at just cold storage systems that are needed in India, in rural areas to ensure food security and storage, you will actually need 4 more coal-fired plants to power those, which we don't have, So we don't have an option, right? But to actually design not solar-powered cold storage systems, because that's again a play of emissions. You'll look at very inefficient cold storage systems and you'll say, let's power them, right? Because I'm getting more offset. But I think designing from an optimized manner with distributed models, with local ownership, with gender, etc., incorporated within those models, that kind of gives much better, more sustained results on the ground, essentially. And maybe a last example that I wanted to give was in the healthcare sector, where we see this in a huge way, right? In a very realistic way, because at the end, what you're trying to do is actually reduce transaction costs for the end users to come to district hospitals, to have to come to PHCs, right? And what we realize is the potential to really disrupt these traditional value chains of needing brick and mortar, of needing, actual kind of setups there. It can completely be disrupted in many ways. You can make do with telemedicine, you can make do with a kiosk, you don't actually have to, set up. So, I mean, it's like going back to the post office era, right? Like at some point, imagine questioning our post office is really needed. And today we are really questioning, right? Our post office is really needed, right? So I think we see that potential in almost every sector when it comes to looking at the growth of that sector, whether it's fisheries, whether it's cold chains, whether it's healthcare and buildings as well, right? 90% of the buildings in rural areas have not yet been built, right? So the potential to actually leave no one behind with a very future mitigation strategy at play here. Underlying core is kind of building resilience from a people and planet perspective. That is where we see a huge opportunity, which we are trying to sort of not only build enough evidence towards, but also see that we can get in a lot more systems thinkers and doers into the space of sustainability in general. Because, while we are in our silos, we see this as one of the major gaps in trying to design appropriate programs, which are actually quite multifaceted. I'll pause there, but happy to come in with questions. Thank you, Kasturi.
Thank you, Huda. We have such limited time, so it may not be possible to come back with a follow-up. But I think I'd like to move into the next aspect that's driving India's digital revolution. One is energy. We've talked about it. But let's now talk about another super critical and literal driver of the revolution, which is the gig worker. Abhijit, through platforms like Zomato, we're seeing the evolution of a new age of informal labor. On the surface, gig workers are seamlessly integrating into our markets and roads, right up till our doorstep. For so many of us, they are like transient scooter symbols on our phone screens. But if you look deeper, gig workers constantly navigate challenging environments. They're often themselves migrant workers, new to the city, its language, and rapidly changing tech interfaces. How do you support them and ensure that they have equity in the phenomenal business and benefits that they are generating?
Yeah. Hi, this is Abhijit, and thanks for having me on the panel. I think this provides me a great platform to share the kind of work that we have been doing in the past. So as you rightly pointed out, the gig workers are essentially the backbone of the platform industry. I mean, you have your customers, you have the merchants, but I mean, the gig workers are essentially the bridge that gaps sort of, these two extremities. Now, gig work, as seen, is something very risky, but I mean, we have had evidences otherwise as well. And we also need to ensure that the gig workers who are working with us, we call them delivery partners, are also feeling safe while they are on the roads. And this does not come at the cost, I mean, our deliveries would not come at the cost of risking the lives of our delivery partners. So, which is why we have a very comprehensive well-being framework. And thankfully, this well-being framework was something that was sort of, co-created with Social Compact and social rights experts and human rights experts, which sort of focuses on the elements that inspire the well-being of a gig worker. Now, the well-being of a gig worker is not something that is one-dimensional. It is a multi-dimensional aspect that has to be taken care of from multiple verticals. So you have a financial well-being, you have a social well-being, you have a mental well-being, you have a physical well-being, you also have a professional well-being. So in terms of financial well-being, we ensure that whatever payments that our delivery partners are sort of entitled to are made on time. We are also ensuring access to social security schemes provided by the government through partnerships. In terms of social well-being, we keep sensitizing the customers and the restaurants to treat our delivery partners with utmost respect. We have a dedicated Instagram channel by the name of Zomato Delivery Partner. You can just subscribe to that channel. It has fun videos on how we are sensitizing both restaurants and our customers. So we don't, ask our delivery partners to rush orders, and we also ask the customers to not rush any of our delivery partners as such, because ultimately your order is going to reach. Uh, in terms of social well-being, again, we sort of also incorporate interactions, peer interaction, because you need to have a peer support system going on that can actually help you navigate some of the ground challenges that you might be facing on a day-to-day basis. We are also trying to solve for social inclusion through uh, creating opportunities for people with diverse needs. We have a dedicated program by the name of Zomato Equitable Action for Livelihoods, which is actually enabling persons with disabilities to come and join our fleet. And we are providing them with utmost care. We are providing them with specialized vehicles that is meant for a delivery job. All in all, we are doing a lot of things that can actually uh, make gig work as something that they prefer, and not just out of doing something that they are doing because they do not have any other option. In fact, a lot of delivery partners, if we meet them, a lot of them have actually joined from formal employment. It is because the kind of flexibility that gig work offers, the kind of timeliness of payouts that they offer, as well as a lot of gig work is actually paying you much better than, let's say, an entry level job with some formal sector. Uh, in terms of professional growth, also, we are focusing a lot on the skill development of our delivery partners in order to help them do their own work in a better way, because this will only help them enhance their earnings. So, and again, amid all of this, since we are also talking about climate change, we are also talking about environment, we also ensure that our delivery partners have the correct ecosystem to operate in when they are facing extreme weather challenges. So we have timely weather notifications that are sent to the delivery partners that tomorrow there is going to be a rainfall, tomorrow there is going to be a lot of fog. So we send timely notifications to our delivery partners, and we have automatic weather stations to sort of incorporate these features. We are also providing them with weather appropriate attire. All our attire carries reflective strips. All our attire is weather appropriate in terms of the GSM that the t-shirt should be, of how many GSM the jacket should be. And I mean, this is something that is very essential to ensure that they are feeling safer while they are on the roads. And we also have something known as the SOS channel. So SOS channel essentially helps the delivery partners get access to an ambulance or an SOS support just at the click of a button. So we are able to now dispatch an ambulance to our delivery partners within a time frame of 13 to 15 minutes if the need arises. So that is the kind of ecosystem we are trying to create for our delivery partners, where they are not only felt recognized, but they are also feeling that the environment is great for them to work and operate.
Thank you, Abhijit, for that. I have a final, actually, two final questions for the panel. But before I ask them, for the audience, if you have any questions, we have about 5 minutes for an audience Q&A, and we encourage you to just paste your questions and whom they are directed at in the chat box. Okay, back to the panel. I'd like to now ask two questions to all of you. What is the one philosophy that you want India to imbibe so that digitalization can be a force for good? And what is the one practice that our audience can start to imbibe to become better benefactors to each other and trustees of our natural resources? Maybe Narayan, do you want to go first?
Can I say no? Just kidding.
You may.
I'm just kidding. No, I can go first. Yeah, that's fine. But what enriching perspectives from each of the panelists. Thank you so much, Anumita, Abhijit, and Huda. I'm going to take a lot of it back to our organization and how we work with this. But I go back to first principles in terms of a philosophy, Kasturi. I think Benjamin Franklin said this sometime in the 1800s, and it has become our organization's mantra now. He had said, "Do well by doing good," and since then, CSR has adopted that as a way of being. But I think it's time now to acknowledge that's not enough. Doing right, that's what we have to abide by. It's much tougher. It's much tougher to commit to. It's much tougher to live by. But doing good is insufficient anymore, and doing right is what we need to abide by. And we need to think of all of the stakeholders we need to do right by. Not just people we serve as customers, not just people who are end benefactors, but the entire ecosystem. So I'd probably say from a philosophy point of view, whether we talk about the digitalization of the world or even the old analog way, because again, self-reflecting upon what we do as people who shape and influence culture, especially the culture of consumption, it is as easy, it should be as easy for us to encourage slow living and mindful living as much as it is for us to encourage fast fashion and overconsumption, right? So maybe we need to introspect, we need to stop, we need to act upon that. So from a philosophy and perspective point of view, that's what I'd propose. So, but maybe if I had to add a couple of other things, it would be to look at it from both a purpose and a pathway perspective as well, as keenly and objectively and sharply as we define KPIs or key performance indicators for ourselves in terms of what success means, and especially in financial terms, we need as sharp indicators of outcomes that are indicators of us doing right, but at the same time as imperative as the financial outcomes are. Only then I think we can enable behavior change within organizations, which then empower us to do the same downstream as well.
Thank you, Narayan. Anumita, would you like to go next?
Well, so what I would say when we look at the challenge, the climate challenge, the air pollution challenge, sustainability challenge, time of incremental steps is over. We really need to leapfrog. We need transformative changes. At the same time, I'll underscore that in India, the opportunity for transformative changes is actually more. Because if you really look at the baseline, despite all our problems, and I gave the example of mobility, even today, even when we are complaining about car congestion and explosive motorization, even then, the majority Indians are still walking, cycling, and using public transport. The most of India and the urban India is yet to be built, right? We have not built it yet. So when so much of building is in the future, if we already have a strong baseline, it really makes a lot more sense for us to make those transformative changes and take the right decisions now. And we must and we should be able to do that. And what gives me the optimism is that despite the challenges, we have begun to see a lot of change. Some of the changes already, in fact, reflected in the panel discussion. And also, the optimism comes from the fact, and this is also from all the studies globally, that the future generation and the current millennial and the Gen Z, right? All studies are showing, again, in the mobility sector, that how they are now going to attach lot more privacy to the experience of mobility and flexible lifestyle and not the ownership of cars. And as a result, even industry will be changing its strategy to meet this new philosophy of the new generation. And that's why I would like to say, when it comes to philosophy and looking at the future, that it is more about creating a new value, new glamour, new privileges around the what is sustainable, walking, cycling, and attach a glamour quotient to it. So it is not always about just trying to save the world. It is a lot more powerful when we say it is really the most cool thing to do, right?
Thank you. Huda?
Thanks so much, Kasturi. So I'll build on what Anumita ji is saying. Definitely would 100% agree to all of that, but also say that we need to embrace it with open arms. It's already here. I think we need to design for the future. And the best thing that we can use digital for is to get rid of waste in the system. I think that's a huge use, inefficiency, waste, drudgery. I think that's a huge use case of digital and really designing for the future. I think as long as we don't let digital do the thinking for us, we are fine as a society. So I'll just add that. Thank you, Anumita.
Right. Abhijit, over to you.
Yeah, so I think at Eternal, we follow the policy of only 1% done, which means we have to act now. So for example, when it comes to managing things sustainably, we recently came up with the order rescue option. So for example, if somebody has placed an order and they don't want it anymore, it is not going to get wasted. It is going to pop up on your Zomato application and somebody can actually buy that food at half the cost. Now this not only prevents wastage of food, but this also ensures that the share of earning that a delivery partner would have earned from that delivery is also going to get into their account. So that is our principle, act now. Else we can only do the catch-up job, and that is not something that we intend to do. So simply, I mean, act now is our philosophy and principle.
Thank you very much for that. We have very profound questions in the chat box and we might need another hour to answer those. So I'm going to pick one. It's not directed at anyone, but I feel like that's something we didn't address in the conversation, which is what metrics can we use to measure progress in achieving a balance between planet, people, and profit? And because it's not directed at anybody, just wondering if anyone would like to take a crack at it. Huda, you do come to mind because you spoke a little bit to this. Would you like to maybe?
I mean, I think it's been challenging for us because I think the metrics that are typically reported and our checkbox metrics, they actually fail to capture the overall need for communicating what is possible with these systems thinking frameworks that we apply, right? So I think the one thing that we have tried to use as a metric internally is to make sure that aspects of energy, climate, they don't remain as a separate agenda and a siloed thinking. Like for us, the more it gets inculcated in core development agendas, whether it's healthcare, agriculture, mother and child care, any different verticals that we see, it should not be an afterthought. So our sort of internal success metric is when it's incorporated into the design of the program itself and not as okay, we've already designed this program and now what do we do about climate? So as long as it's integrated into existing thinking, that's what we look at as success when people are already using these things as part and parcel of the program.
If I may add to that, I think it's such a strong imperative currently. The question itself was really pointed. To take manufacturing as an example, typically the cost of manufacturing incorporates the cost of machinery, the cost of materials, the cost of people's time. But where is the cost of energy? both production as well as the dissipation and impact on all of the other associated parts of the ecosystem. As Huda is saying, we need an overhaul of the metrics by themselves to be integrated into everything that we do in the normal course of being.
Would you want to add anything to that?
I mean, I would just like to say that, increasingly now, the policy tools are going to change, are already changing a lot, demanding a co-benefit approach to defining the scope of our interventions. And in that, if we are able to include the complex set of indicators that show that how, while you are improving the economic efficiency of your intervention, and your profits, your revenue. But at the same time, are you being able to deliver on the intended objectives of sustainability, livability, job generation, equity? And if we are able to do that and build that into all our funding strategies, in our investment plans, and make it mandatory. And now we know that even industry is also going to come under pressure because they have to now report on their life cycle performance. Right, so that really means dealing with the metrics that includes a whole range of complex indicators. So increasingly, policies are going to become a lot more demanding a lot more co-benefit approach. So I think that is going to set and the terms of change in the future.
Thank you. Abhijit, I feel like a lot of the stuff that you mentioned are potentially very good indicators for worker well-being, right? But if there's anything that you want to quickly add to what you've already shared, you can go ahead.
Yeah, so again, whatever we do for delivery partner well-being is not philanthropy per se. It is a business use case for us because the delivery partners are essentially service provided to us. So we need to ensure that they are also feeling as competitive as any of our other business partners do. So that again is very important for us to ensure that whatever we do in the value chain is also directly contributing to the growth of the value chain members.
Wonderful. I think we have to close this session now because it's a few minutes beyond our end time. Thank you everybody very much for sharing your knowledge and ending this very grim conversation on a more optimistic note. Quick recap, we have a report coming out on the 27th of Feb on this topic. It's extremely comprehensive and we encourage you all to read it. This conversation itself went into so many areas of why this problem is urgent, why it's not enough to be just good. We have to change. We have to look at the fundamentals of consumption and not repeat the same mistake, but in a new format. We have to reimagine how we live in cities and in villages. And at the end of the day, we have to care about each other and look at each other as equitable partners. With that, we close this session. To our audience members, we have a feedback poll on this session. If you would please take 2 minutes to fill it in before you leave. And thank you to the research team and thank you to our panelists again for joining us. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you, Kasturi. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you.